Hi there. Today I want to address the question of why so many people believe that attaining native-like levels in accent or fluency or expressive ability in a second language is not really possible if you're learning the language as an adult. Now there are many reasons for this, and I'm going to talk about a few main ones. So the reasons I'll talk about aren't listed in order of importance. The first one I want to talk about is belief. Because you believe something, it means that the odds of you actually exceeding your belief is very, very limited. As Henry Ford once said, whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you are right. And it amounts to the fact that if you believe you can't do something, well, it just means that whenever you come across a problem, you're going to unconsciously be thinking, well, the reason I can't achieve it because I know I can't do it anyway, so why even try? So you're not going to go out of your way to find out an alternate solution. You're not going to go out of the way to try to find what you can do to get past the problem. So unconsciously, you tend to give up. And that's fundamentally the reason. And so beliefs actually form an important part. So this is why I'm talking about this today in this video clip, is I want to dispel this myth, because it is a myth. And I can say it's a myth because I've seen enough examples to know that. So the second reason, which you might find surprising, but I believe it's a critical one, is the issue of practice or use. I have troubles with this word practice in English because practice has a certain implication that it's sort of artificial and you're repeating and it's not natural, let's say. Whereas in using a skill, a lot of the time, what's important, you actually use the skill. So for example, people talk about, I need to practice English. Well, practice English doesn't quite get it right. I believe with some things, clearly you need to do some practice. But I believe what's really important in school is using it. So for example, if you're going to be practicing basketball, you're at home playing shots or you're doing things, right? But if you get on the game and playing games, that's not practicing. You're actually doing it. You're actually playing the game of basketball, which English is the same. You can be at home practicing certain sounds or doing certain exercises, but ultimately, until you get out into the court, out into life, and actually using the English, it doesn't amount to much, really, as many of you will know. So anyway, so back to the question of this practice-use issue. You need extensive hours of using a skill, like English or a language, to get to the highest levels. And practice is not enough. You need a lot of use. So I go back to the example of basketball because it's a really good analogy. So because you're practicing basketball at home or with your mates, it doesn't mean you can go out in the next day or the next week and become like Michael Jordan. There's a lot of games in between. You need extensive use. Malcolm Gladwell said you need actually 10,000 hours of, he says, practice. Again, I'll come back to use. So 10,000 to me sounds like a lot. And if you work out the mechanics of that in terms of how many hours a day, adds up to a lot. I'm not convinced about that in terms of mastering a language, but you certainly need a lot. And you need it not just going out and talking to somebody on the street, but you need a whole array of it, from talking about family kind of stuff, to arguing with people, to talking about ideas, to talking about religion, to disagreements, to negotiating. So all these different kinds of language. You've got to get yourself involved in, not necessarily all kinds, but you need to have a really broad array of situations where you can actually use the language. So if you're not exposing yourself to these different kinds of use, you're going to feel you're limited, and so it actually creates a lack of confidence in yourself. The wider the variety of people you talk to and situations you're involved in, the more over time you start to believe in yourself and think, I can do all this, and you become more and more confident, as it were, about your abilities. However, use or practice is not really sufficient. I mean, I'll give you an example. I live in Australia, and here we have migrants who've lived here for many, many years, and you've been using English for a long, long time, more than 10,000 now, some of them, and still their English doesn't sound at all native-like. It actually sounds heavily accented and with sometimes severe grammatical issues. They can make themselves understood, don't get me wrong, but in terms of becoming native-like, they're still a long way from it. They've satisfied the need for extensive practice or use, but they haven't managed to get to the highest levels. And the reason for that is they haven't learned how to use the time when they're using the language to actually improve. which is a whole different level of learning that you have to get engaged in. Which brings me to the next reason, which is the third, I believe, which is that there's a difference between learning English or a language at a lower level or learning it or improving it at the high levels. So at the lower levels, it's more a question of do you know it or don't you know it. The distinctions are very coarse. So do you know the sound or you don't know the sound, or can you say this word, or can you say the sentence, or can you speak about the past, or you can't speak about the past. At some point you start to master that and become quite good at it. But to get to native-like levels, you require more than just a bit of mastery. You need to get better and better and better. At the upper levels, you're talking about more and more sensitivity. You're talking about being attentive to finer and finer gradations of meaning, or finer and finer differences in meaning, or in sounds, or in whatever. And so to do that, you have to become more and more sensitive, more and more perceptive. And without doing that, it's not really possible to get to the highest of levels. And the only way you can do that is to do that kind of activity in the midst of talking to people while using the language. And so this is a skill or an art that many people don't actually master, because no one's really taught this. No one actually shows you how to keep learning while you're using the language. Now, sometimes this happens ad hoc or accidentally, or it's part of what happens. It just sort of seems to happen. But this is ad hoc. It means it's just accidental or random. It doesn't mean you have a system for it. So without having a system for it, it just remains a random event, which you can't really rely upon to keep you moving up. And that's another reason why people get stuck, because they don't really master what they have to do to become better and better and better and better at the upper levels. So it's an art form that people don't really talk about, you don't really hear mentioned about. It's just something people assume, well, after you left the class you can just keep improving. Well, sorry, it doesn't happen like that usually. This then enables us to move to the next reason, and that is that a part of this learning at the high levels of becoming more and more sensitive, of becoming aware of the finer and finer gradations of meaning, requires you to have some sort of passion or interest about what you're doing. Because without having that kind of passion, that kind of drive inside you, it has you want to keep paying attention, it has you want to keep finding the differences, and it has you want to keep doing this, it's not going to happen because nothing is driving you forward. This passion is evident for anybody who's at the highest level of skill in any area, whether it's a sport or whether it's business or whether it's arts, or anything in life. The people at the highest levels display this kind of passion and this kind of urgency, or this kind of feeling about what they want to do. And in a sense, the feeling is you can't even drag them away from it. They don't want to leave it. And this comes back to that they feel inside in their heart, and it's not in their head, it's in their heart, as it were, that they want to keep doing this because it's part of who they are. It's a part of what they are, is just this thing of getting better and better at it. And this getting better and better is not just, I want to get better and better, is a reason why. So it's to attain a level so they can be somebody, so they can fulfill their own potential, so they can feel alive. It's something more deeper than just wanting to getting better and better. But this passion is critical. So if you don't feel this passion, if you don't start to do something that enables this passion to show itself and to become evident to you, you can actually feel it, I would say, again, it's nearly impossible to get to the native-like levels because there's nothing driving you forward. So this passion that we're talking about is not just like a passion, but it has to be also in the way you're actually learning. So if, for example, if you're learning in ways that don't lend themselves to passion appearing, like, for example, studying in a book. I mean, I don't know if you can get really passionate about studying in a book. Maybe you can, but I haven't experienced it. Your practices and what you do have to, in fact, support or be sort of mixed up with the passion. So the two things move together. So you have to develop practices, you have to develop ways of learning that support your passion and that basically keep feeding you. So the practices can't be divorced from the passion. So you can't be, for example, studying from a book and then hopefully that will support your passion somehow. It's just not going to work. So you have to have practices that actually not support, but a part of that come from their passion. have to be, you're passionate about what you're doing, and what you're doing supports your passion, as it were. So it's like a loop. The two support each other. So that's another problem that some people have, is that they have this kind of passion, but the practices that they use don't really support the passion. So actually the practices that they're engaged in actually reduce the passion. And so that becomes a big problem. So there's a whole art, in a sense, to finding the kind of practices that will support your passion and having a passion that supports the practices. So I hope all that's made some sense to you, and you can see that why there are real reasons why having this idea that a second language can't be mastered as an adult is really a myth. It's nothing more than that. And it is a myth because most people just don't understand what they have to do, and as a result, the belief becomes self-perpetuating. It supports itself because they're doing the wrong kinds of things. Of course they can't get to the highest levels. And so the only way you can break this myth is one, start believing you can, and then start changing your practices and changing what you're doing. And so that will then start helping you to create this passion that you need, that will then create you more practices that will support the passion, and so forth. So it becomes like a loop. Anyway, I hope this little talk has been of help to you, and talk to you more a bit later on when I'll start to unpack some of these elements. Bye for now. It's been Andrew Wyler here.